Great.
All right, perfect. Well, why don't I just start off with a quick introduction, and I'll allow you to introduce yourself. I'll go ahead and just give a little background as to how we got to this point. Does that sound all right?
Sounds great.
Okay, perfect. All right, everyone. So thank you for taking a few minutes and joining us this evening. So we've got Delegate Glenn Davis with us today. A couple weeks ago, I had reached out Delegate Davis, and we talked about doing an Ask Me Anything. I think there's a lot of interesting topics, especially related to the Second Amendment in Virginia. He is right in the middle of it as a House delegate. There's bills that are being tossed through committee and voted on and debated right now. So we're going to talk a little bit about the current status of the bills, and we're going to talk a little bit about specific bills that he's introduced and he's voted on and he's debated. So we'll get into all that. But first, why don't you go ahead and give us a little bit of background about yourself and tell folks who may not be familiar with you and your role, sort of who you are, how you got into it, and what you're up to.
Sure. Well, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for everyone for joining today. I really appreciate the opportunity. So I've had the honor of representing the 84th House of Delegates District now for, well, this is my 7th year up here. The 84th is dead center in Virginia Beach. So those that are know that area down there, it's kind of the Green Run all the way out to the Red Mill area and the Princess Anne area. Prior to that, I was 5 years on Virginia Beach City Council. I'm kind of an entrepreneur at heart. I lost my job 6 weeks before Christmas in 1999 and started a company. I have a one-bedroom apartment and IT company. And just been blessed and lucky, and it's taken off, and have great employees I work with, a great business partner, and I continue to do that today. Very passionate about the Second Amendment for a number of reasons. First, I actually grew up in shooting sports. When I was in high school, I was in NJRTC. I started shooting in 10th grade, 3-position small bore rifle. That's what my discipline was, and I really enjoyed it. I was not an athlete by any stretch of the imagination, but I did excel at that, and shot competitively all through high school. Barely missed making U.S. team tryouts my senior year. During that time, my coach would have me shoot other disciplines as well that I really enjoyed, so pistol, M1 Grands, that sort of thing, out of Quantico. I actually shot for Langley Air Force Base for a little while my senior year on a little bit of a traveling team. So that's my passion from the shooting sports side. From the my passion from the what we all believe as far as to protect ourselves, our family, and that sort of thing. I don't talk about it much. There is a speech online that I gave that y'all can look up if you like. But when I was 9, we lost my uncle to a convenience store robbery about a mile as the crow flies from where I live today. He was just working that evening, taken out back, and killed. And one of the, I guess, 24 unsolved homicides today in Virginia Beach. But I grew up, I can remember that as clear as day. I remember sitting on the couch. I remember the phone ringing on the wall. I remember my dad answering it. It was my uncle. I remember them piling into pickup trucks. And I remember every comment that was made. And there was a lot of speculation that that person had probably done it before. This was before truth in sentencing and abolition of parole. There was a lot of blame going around, but no one ever blamed firearms. No one ever said how to get that, or it should be harder to get firearms. If anything, it was my family wishing and thinking that he should have had his on him that day. So it's those two pieces that are personal to me that bring forth that passion that I've got from the personal experience. And then, of course, up here in the General Assembly, been honored to be involved with things that relate to business and actually the Second Amendment as it's become more and more of a front and center issue in the General Assembly.
Fantastic. Amazing story, amazing background. One of the things that I really appreciate about you specifically is how accessible you are. I mean, a couple of times we've messaged over Facebook Messenger, and I had to ask whether or not it was really you because I'm so unaccustomed to delegates and senators actually responding to folks personally. So thank you for just being accessible and available through social media and platforms like this. one of the questions that we had talked about originally is this article that was written about you that accused of some really strong things in regards to campaign contributions and gun control votes. So I wanted to dive right into there specifically. The article mentioned a $44,000 in-kind contribution from the Virginia Democrats. Would you mind just telling us a little bit about what that contribution was about and how the money was used?
Sure, be happy to. And first, I wanted to thank you again just for the opportunity. I appreciate the comments about me being accessible. I have a great staff, but the thing that I think people are concerned about the most nowadays is it really the elected representative that is following up, or is it someone else typing emails out? Which is why I love doing these, because it is me, it is my voice and my thoughts. Not that Andrew and Mara aren't wonderful as far as responding to emails for me, but I like to be able to do it myself so people know it's me, and this puts it on a platform that people can be sure of it. And I think many of your viewers may have also gotten emails from me recently if they've emailed or texted me on different issues where it's actually a video response. I just, in this day and age, want people to know that it's actually the legislator that sees it and responds to it. With regards to the $44,000, that was pretty interesting. So I had a race like I've never had before. At this point, I think I've had 8 races in my life. People always stretch the truth and exaggerate the truth, but I've never had what happened this year, which is my Democrat opponent and their consultants just flat out lie about my positions. I mean, it was absurd. And I got it was so over the top, I started using it in my campaign literature. So if you can imagine, they sent out, they did $560,000 at TV. Their total mail budget, I think, was $300,000 in mail that they had put out. It was lies about me taking money from this charter school I helped create, and that's what the graphics portrayed. They didn't actually outright say Glenn stole money, but it's Glenn took money from private schools or public schools to give to his charter school. It was Glenn's against healthcare and takes money from insurance companies, when I had actually been fighting insurance companies for 4 years on different issues and a whole bunch of stuff like that. So when they started sending out mail pieces 1 every 2 days, I actually started taking those mail pieces and using them in my mail pieces, on my online Facebook videos, in my online advertisements. I would actually take them to public forums and literally hold them up. And whereas my opponent thought these things were negative and they were going to win on these, I was going out there with it. Well, the issue came in with the definition of an in-kind contribution. So it basically says that if you end up receiving something, or if you end up receiving something, service or good that is of value, you need to claim it as an in-kind contribution. Well, if I had to produce all these mailers, which are tangible, and to use in my ads and in my mail pieces, etc., there's a cost there. And so I literally claimed the estimated value of their mail pieces as an in-kind contribution from the Democratic Party of Virginia when I filed my finance report. I actually called our lead attorney for our caucus too before I did this, just to make sure my head was on straight, and it definitely was kind of way it reads, it probably should be claimed. And he said, Glenn, it's definitely looks like you've got to claim everything that you receive benefit from, and I see how you're doing this. So I didn't claim the in-kind because they lied and it helped me, or it rose my name ID. I claimed it because there was a tangible physical cost to producing the collateral that I was using in my mail pieces and ads. You can imagine the Democratic Party hit the roof over this. But I'm the type of guy where if you want to come at me, go ahead. But I'm going to take what you're putting out there and take it right to the public. And that's what I did. They didn't like it. They actually tried to have me investigated for campaign violations, and it was ruled that I was well within the Virginia Code when it came to claiming that. So it was not a $44,000 check. It was not something the Dems wanted to do to help me. But in this day and age, with the voters now, and where I truly believe now more than ever that they appreciate authentic representatives, that I just took it and ran with their stuff, and they didn't see it coming, didn't like it, but that's how I ended up claiming the $44,000 from them.
That's a pretty incredible story, and I wish that the New Virginia Post or whatever that article was would have investigated that and talked to you before publishing that, because it was completely misleading. And to be honest, I almost took what they wrote and published a similar post and was going to run with that before I contacted you and got a little bit more information, which led to this Ask Me Anything. So I'm glad that you were able to just explain some of that and give us some of that background. There's a couple more questions I want to ask related to that post, and then we'll open it up for the audience to come up with their own questions.
Perfect.
But one of the follow-up questions I wanted to ask was, the author of that article had specifically mentioned that there were some gun confiscation bills or gun confiscation orders that you voted to expand.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't find any of those bills or orders that you voted to expand, but I know HB 961, which is currently in a delayed period, and the red flag laws are still very much alive. Could you talk a little bit about any gun confiscation orders that you may have voted to expand, or where you stand on HB 961 and the current red flag laws?
Be happy to. So first of all, I don't know of any bills either that I voted when it came to confiscation of firearms or firearm accessories. I can tell you I don't believe in that, never would support that, have not been able to find a bill, but I take the vote, so I know there's not a bill. But I will tell you where I am on both those issues. So 961 is a crazy bill. I mean, it just, and it's not just crazy because of it going after our Second Amendment rights. There's well-meaning legislation that people may have that's written well, that we disagree philosophically, and good people can disagree, although I think we're on the right side of the Second Amendment. But when the bill is also written so poorly that it almost makes it impossible to comply and be a law-abiding gun owner. I'll give you an example, and it's, I think, truly an example of people writing legislation that don't understand what they're writing about. So the magazine. So the way that 961 ended up was any magazine that held more than 12 rounds would have been an illegal magazine, and they weren't grandfathered. So that means that technically what the patron of the bill intended was any magazine that only held 12 or less rounds you could keep. The problem with that is it went on to say, as long as it cannot be easily altered to hold more than 12 rounds. So as we all know as law-abiding gun owners, and I have a SIG P320 as my carry, it's comes in 12 and 15 round capacities, but all the SIG mags for striker fire pistols, and same thing with Glocks, have removable base plates for a couple of reasons. On mine, it's if you know the SIG subcompact, there's no place to put your pinky, so you can pop the base plate out and put one on there that I've got a place for my pinky. Likewise, some people, especially the ladies, like to put a base plate on there that is fashionable, different colors. Men like to have the American flag maybe engraved on the bottom of the base plate that you can buy from a couple of online places. And then lastly, of course, is you can buy base plates that extend the capacity of the magazine. To the extent that you can pop off that base plate, every Glock mag and SIG mag and a lot of others would have been illegal to have, no grandfather clause, which I just thought was absurd and clearly a situation where someone just didn't understand what they were talking about. Additionally, the patron of the bill and so many others kept talking about firearm safety. We want, firearm safety. If this is about firearm safety, why are you banning muzzle brakes when the purpose of a muzzle brake is to reduce recoil? I think we can all agree that if you want to categorize weapons by the safest or least prone to an accident, especially for those very new to firearms, those with less recoil tend to be less likely to have an accident. So if that's the case, why would you ban a muzzle brake? Why would you ban a compensator? When you start talking muzzle rise. So it's stuff like that that was just, I thought was crazy. Never mind the outright ban of other types of firearms. And I've said a number of times also, the way they defined an assault firearm includes pistols where the magazine goes in front of the trigger. And, I'd mentioned before that I shot competitively. When you shoot competitive pistol, your handguard is made out of wood. They actually carve it to your hand. Your magazine goes in front of the trigger. So all of our international competitive pistol shooters would have been felons, basically, if that bill would have passed. Obviously not maybe intended by the patron, but once again, this is what happens when people write bills about things they don't understand. So that's 961. There's a lot of other bad things about it, but I won't take all the time on that. The red flag law, that's a number of issues with the red flag. First off, and I actually have a YouTube video on my page that goes into red flag deeper, but it allows a law enforcement officer to go in front of a judge, and if deemed that you're a threat to yourself or others, that they can come and take your firearms. Now, we're a nation of you're innocent until proven guilty. We're a nation where you get to keep your rights until proven guilty of something where you shouldn't have them, not you lose them until you prove yourself innocent of whatever you're being accused of. So that's the first problem I have, that whole due process piece. The second part I've got a problem with, and Nick Freitas was great on this, because they kept saying this is about preventing suicides, and this is about our veterans, and we all know it is really sad, but there's a high rate of suicide amongst our veterans. And the thought was, well, if they're a threat to themselves, we can come take their weapons. There's two problems. Nick brought up the issue that, you're going to go to someone's house. You're going to take, let's say that veteran has 3 weapons. You find 2, you don't find a third. What's the likelihood that he's waiting for you to come back to get that third before he decides, I've got to make a decision on whether to use it on myself or not? And that's not the situation we want to put our veterans in. Additionally, if you're going to tell me that this is to help our veterans, why aren't you going out there with a therapist or a psychiatrist or going out there to help the person? Why isn't a law enforcement officer just showing up there to go grab the weapons from the veterans and that's it? If you're really looking to help that veteran, if you know there is someone that is such a potential harm and detriment to themselves or others, why is it that you're not going out there with someone that can truly help that person from a mental state, as opposed to just going out there and potentially making things worse? So big issues there. And then, of course, the whole scenario of getting your rights back. I asked when we did questions in subcommittee, when you go if the judge decides that you shouldn't have your weapons and decides to keep them longer than that 14-day period for that quick hearing, you're allowed to go in front of the judge and have a hearing, but you're not afforded an attorney if you can't afford to pay for one. But according to the other side, it's going to be a Commonwealth attorney on the other side trying to make sure you don't get your Second Amendment rights back. And how lopsided I thought was that you lose your Second Amendment rights unless you can prove that you're not guilty of something. And then, oh, by the way, they're going to stick a professional attorney who's well-versed in legal process against you, and you've got to figure out how to pay for your own to figure out the same thing. So that's the overview on those 2 bills.
Thanks. Yeah, the SB 16, which got rolled into HB 961, and the red flag laws are 2 of the most aggressive gun control measures out there. I think that's what activated a lot of Virginians to start going to their board of supervisors, getting the sanctuary resolutions passed. It certainly woke me up. There are a lot of less overt measures that the Democrats have been trying to pass related to gun control. Things like gun violence research, spending money for that, and designating Gun Violence Awareness Day. Where do you specifically stand on some of those issues where it's about taking money for research and building awareness about gun violence?
Well, if I remember that one correctly, so it's Gun Violence Awareness Day, and so just so everyone knows, we have there's 365 days in a year, and I'm pretty sure that we have 4 times as many recognitions over the course of the year on particular days. So everything has a awareness day or whatever the case is, and typically they're all passed, and I don't know if many people really after that year know what day is what. I do know that there was a bill that created a fund that money, I even think private money could be put into to help localities when it came to firearm safety and stuff like that. So there was a bill up there. I voted for that one. If someone wants to create a fund and people want to put money into it, that's fine. I hope it goes into what we deem as helpful as firearm safety, which is, let's fund some safety inside of the schools. I always thought, I put a bill in a while back, a few years ago, about Idiot the Eagle. The NRA, I thought, had a great gun safety program that is not branded NRA, that they're willing to give to the schools. And that's the type of gun safety stuff that I think is extremely helpful. But it would be up to the localities, if there ever gets to be a reasonable amount of money in there. I had a similar resolution that went with a bill that I had put in, and it would have created a Firearm Safety Awareness Week. Initially, I was working with a couple of the members of the VCDL back home, and the father of firearm safety happens to have a birthday in September. So we decided it would be the last week of September. There would be a sales tax holiday, very similar to what you have for back to school sales tax holidays and hurricane preparedness holiday as well. Initially, we had to bring it to August because all the sales tax holidays in Virginia is that last weekend in August. So we did that, but then the Democrats still killed the bill. So we tried to do one that would actually be helpful. It just didn't get out of the House.
And talking about gun safety, I know you had introduced a bill that regarded concealed carry permits and the level of training needed to get a concealed carry permit. I know this is something that you took some heat on from gun rights groups. They thought you're trying to make it more difficult. But I wanted to give you a chance to really explain what the intention was. And would you just tell us a little bit about what happened to the bill and if there's any concealed carry permit bills still alive? Sure.
No, I'd be happy to. So I was working on a bill towards, I guess, maybe a few weeks out from session. And it's House Bill, I think it's 142, if I remember correctly. 142, Andrew? Yeah, 142. So in Virginia, there's already a requirement that you take a you take a gun safety class to get your concealed carry permit. That is already a requirement, has been a requirement, obviously was not going anywhere given the results of last year's election. Just for reference, we've had constitutional carry come up a couple of times in the past. When I've been in the General Assembly, I've supported it then. I voted for it again this year. I do believe in constitutional carry. But since you have to take this class, I wanted to make sure that we had protection for Virginians taking this class and they weren't being taken advantage of by some out-of-state individuals and entities that were doing these so-called gun safety classes and taking people's money and then them realizing after they took it that it was a complete waste of 45 minutes to an hour of their life and did not give them any of the information they thought they were going to be receiving. I'll give you an example. I watched over a dozen or so of these gun safety classes that qualify for concealed carry, and I'll never forget one of them said, "Always remember, this is the chamber of a firearm, and always point the gun in a safe direction," which may not always be down because you could be standing over top of someone. And I mean, that type of information, the only people that probably don't need to have a firearm right now are ones that really need to be told that. So I remember going through a long time ago and getting my concealed carry and thinking of, what is it I wish I knew, that I didn't know to ask then or didn't get told. And I've talked to some others, and they said, "Glenn, I really thought I was going to get information about best practices and laws around concealed carry in Virginia, or information that would be helpful because, people are paying between $35 and $75 for these online courses." So, and in looking at some of the things that I thought it'd be nice to know whether it's in there or not, would be things like what your the best practices when you're pulled over by law enforcement. when I thought about that initially, I knew the answer was not to tell the officer walking up to my car, "Officer, I've got a gun." I knew that wasn't the right answer, but I didn't know what the best practice was. And through a whole bunch of looking at YouTube videos, I came up with what I think we all probably think is probably a best practice, which is always have your concealed carry behind your driver's license. And when the officer walks up, hand them both together, and with their hands on the wheel, just say, "Officer, I'm a law-abiding concealed carry permit holder, and my firearm is X, wherever it happens to be." The thought of brandishing a weapon, not everyone that goes to get their concealed carry is an attorney. And so I've always believed the law-abiding gun owners want to stay law-abiding, but we just have to sometimes know what the laws are. And you would think that would be in the classes. So I thought, okay, the way I'm going to do this is I'll get rid of these online classes. And that way we don't have to worry about these out-of-state entities doing this stuff, which takes advantage of these new concealed carry permit holders that are applying. And a friend of mine called and said, "Glenn, I had to actually put the bill in online because we were coming to a deadline, and so I was still working on the bill." And he said, "Glenn, how about those with disabilities? And they may not be able to get to an online or an in-person class." And I said, that's a really good point. I never thought about that. And then I started thinking, as much as I'm from Virginia Beach, and I've got probably 4 ranges within inside of 30 minutes or so, and I can take a class pretty much almost every day of the week. There are many around the state that's not quite that simple. Ranges aren't that close, not that many classes, and if someone truly has their life threatened, you don't want it to take so long before they're able to carry concealed to protect themselves. So that's when I figured, okay, I don't have the right answer, but I got to come up with something. So I worked with the VCDL groups back home, and we came up with a number of answers. One of which was just to say, hey, look, if you're going to put a online course out there, just in a disclaimer, put whether or not some best practices with regards to concealed carry in Virginia and some of the obligations and rules of concealed carry are included as well. Also, I found out a couple of classes did this, a couple didn't, but just so people realize that that you can't take this course for someone else. I know that seems common sense, but it's just a statement up there that says, if you're taking this for concealed carry under the threat of perjury, you attest that it's you. And then the last thing is that in Virginia, it is already a requirement that you have to be a certified NRA instructor or Virginia certified instructor to be able to do a concealed carry class. But when you look at some of these out-of-state ones, they don't tell you their name. You can't find anything about these entities. So I just stated, when you start the class, you just have to, your name and what your certification is, and just have that credibility there. So we did that, and then we also, on the backside, said, and if someone takes an in-class gun safety course, then they qualify for a $50 income tax credit on their Virginia income tax return. That way, if people are able to get out there over time to take a class, we incent them to consider doing so, but obviously don't penalize anyone if they can't. So that's kind of where the bill went, which I was much happier with. I always believe, I'm never the guy to put my head in the sand when it comes to having a problem, but I am someone that believes that you need a lot of people around the table to make sure you get the right answer. And the bill, as I just discussed, was the version of the bill that was actually introduced in subcommittee. So we didn't introduce the get rid of the online class in sub. When it came forward, it was that full version, not getting rid of the online, just putting some protections for the consumer in place. And then, and if the consumer is someone that wants to, they know all the stuff, they just want to take any course, they can still do that. It's just kind of make sure you know what you're taking. So that's kind of the overview on what my bill was. There are some bills out there still that do get rid of the online class, and they've made their way out of the House, so it's over in the Senate right now, that are combined with some other really bad ideas inside of them.
Gotcha. I'm going to go ahead and start weaving in a couple of questions from the audience while I ask a couple more of mine. I have seen a couple people, Perchon and Bonnie, ask specifically about HB 142, which is the concealed carry permit bill that you were just talking about. Mm-hmm. Their questions are about the timing of it. seeing that there were so many gun control bills being pushed in this legislative session, and also some of the backlash that you may have received from Facebook and other social media channels. So if I could just combine those into asking, looking back now at the bill, do you think it was still a good idea to release that bill given the timing? And then the second part is, how did you deal with the backlash, and did it impact anything with that bill from your side?
Sure. So, and I appreciate the question. So, a couple of things. So, I wish I'd had more time to flush out the angle and have the conversations I had to get to the version that we ended up actually putting in subcommittee. I still think that bill in subcommittee is a good bill. I love the tax credit for the $50. The companion resolution is what created the sales tax holiday, which is something that the VCDL have been asking for years, and I thought was a great thing. So I wish that I had more time before I threw something out there. But I do think it's important to put it out there because twofold. First is Virginians who are truly, not all Virginians, in many cases, Virginians' first association with a firearm is in a gun shop or a pawn store. And so they're truly looking for the information to make sure they are that law-abiding gun owner. And I don't like Virginians being taken advantage of. I don't like them being, Virginia telling them they have to go waste money online, and they're thinking they're going to get something of value, and they end up not getting anything of value. But I do like, I wish I had more time to get to the scenario that we ended up in. The second reason why I mentioned the timing of having some of this stuff is, someone had asked me, Glenn, why is it our responsibility to make sure other people, are law-abiding and understand the law? They can, if they understand it, great. And if they make a mistake, it's on them. And, that's, unfortunately, in today's society, that's not quite the case. We know that if there's any accident or incident with a firearm that the media deems as potentially preventable, that they will use that to take away more of our rights as law-abiding gun owners. I'm telling you, we're probably one tragic accident away with a child before we're talking about mandatory trigger locks on firearms when they're not in your possession. So I think as a community, it's on us to make sure that those that are looking for information and perceive that they're getting information on how to be law-abiding gun owners get it, because when someone makes a mistake or does something that they would never have done it had they known where the law was or just wasn't attuned to it, it comes back and impacts all of us as law-abiding gun owners. Specifically, when you start talking about brandishing a weapon, that's probably one of the most important things for a concealed carry permit holder to realize is, if you've got that weapon on you, and let's just say, you're open carrying, but it's under a jacket, so technically it's a concealed carry. You're in a heated argument with someone, and your jacket gets, somewhat pulled back accidentally or whatever, and, shows part of the weapon, that starts going down the route of brandishing. Now, I'm not an attorney, but those are the things that I think is helpful just so we don't continue to accidentally get a bad name when that the media is out there is trying to put us under a spotlight. So I think that's where the important part is. Rob, there was a third part to your question, so I answered if I wish I would have waited, and I answered that one. I wish I'd had it right, and I answered the other half, but you had a third piece in there.
Yeah, so I think that was about the sort of backlash from people who thought that was going to make it more difficult for them to get their permit. How did you respond to that in Facebook, and how did you handle all of that? I see a few questions come up about phone lines being disconnected or Facebook comments being deleted. So what sort of measures did you take to respond to everyone who just piles on a delegate or senator when they're unhappy with them? And how do you make yourself available to folks who do want to voice those concerns?
So I know it sounds kind of ironic, but I loved it. And so there's a gentleman that, I have a video online that y'all can look up. I responded to this very directly with this person. And it was out there on YouTube. And I have so many new friends. I mean, Rob, I don't think I would have met you had he not tried to rake me over the coals and spread all these lies around there, right? So, and I have a lot of new VCDL friends around the state because of all this misinformation that was spread. So the way I handle that sort of thing, first off, we didn't disconnect any lines. I would never do that. There was a situation. It was on a Saturday. There was a huge email that went around. People started calling in. It overloaded the number of pathways that we have, and so it just all the calls that came in simultaneously at some points couldn't get answered. And if phone companies, there's no way you disconnect the phone line on a Saturday and manage to get it back up on a Saturday. Because we had it was back up by the end of the weekend, and not back up. It's just the call volume had slowed down. So on Monday, I actually changed providers, so that would never happen again. I never had to worry about the number of pathways, simultaneous pathways on calls until that happened. So that's the first thing. We didn't disconnect any lines. We'd never do it. Didn't delete any Facebook posts. You'll find out I don't now. If you go on to, I have a Facebook page, and there were a few people that decided that they were going to go onto every post on my page that had nothing to do with firearms. It could have been me talking about my wife or whatever happened to be going on that day. And if you're going to post 10 times about House Bill 142, after you've posted in the 142 post, yeah, I'm probably going to make it more efficient for people. So when they go on there and they're trying to read about whatever that post happened to be about, they're not seeing 140. And I didn't delete them all. I just didn't want 30 142 posts inside of a post about my wife or some other thing that was going on. But anything that was related to firearms, I left there. You can go on there today and you can find posts that call me a number of different names. Now, I do have, and I think everyone does, profanity. Facebook automatically scrubs in my account. So I just, just because there could be, younger adults that are on there as well. So, but other than that, I don't scrub it. You can call me anything you want in the book. I'll respond. And then what we ended up doing is we called a lot of people back, a lot of people. And a lot of those that actually left me some voicemails with a little bit emotionally elevated, let's say, and very passionate. And they were surprised that I called back, and we had a great conversation. I put a number of Facebook posts out on the gentleman's page that started this whole thing, and so those, to his credit, are still out there from my understanding. And then I actually did a YouTube or a live video like this, and we emailed it to over 1,000 people, literally, that had texted me or emailed me, which was me on camera explaining what I was being accused of, what the truth is, the fact that I don't know why this guy went down this road. I mean, I do. He raises money off this, so it is what it is. But at the end of the day, I have a lot more friends now, and I've always ended everything I've done thanking everyone for their passion. Look, I'm glad you called me. I'm glad everyone out there was emotionally passionate, because I know after you emailed me, after you called me, as passionate as you were going to call that next person, and it may have been that Democrat on that subcommittee with me or the committee with the same passion as you initially called or emailed me. So trust me, if anyone has seen the videos out there of me in subcommittee, I share that same passion, and it came out on my floor speeches and my committee speeches, because this just isn't a small tax increase. Not that I like tax increases either, but it's not just something small. I mean, this is our Second Amendment rights. How can you not be passionate about it? So I appreciate everyone's passion when they called. I don't hold it against anyone. I'm glad they have that passion. So I made a new friend, and I know the next call they made probably made a difference.
What is the most impactful way for a citizen, a constituent, to reach out to a senator or delegate and get them to listen to their perspective or viewpoint and consider changing their mind? Is it calls, email, in-person lobbying? What affects you the most? And what advice would you give these grassroots activists like ourselves who really want to change some minds?
All the above. So I'll answer this question for me. And I can't say it's the same for everyone else out there, because for any of your members watching right now who may have been extremely elevated on the messages they left for me or the emails they sent me and had very choice words, they probably got a call back. we all have limited time in the day, and I try to reach back to everyone, but I mean, literally it was hundreds of emails and phone calls that we were getting. So, but I spent more of my time with those that were highly elevated than ones that said, "Hey, Glenn, I understand," or have you looked at tweaking this? Not that I didn't want to reach back out to them too. But I can't say that's true for everyone. That if you go and attack the character of a legislator, that's going to get their attention to call you back. It just happens with me. That is one of the things that gets my attention because I want to be able to set the record straight, and I want to be able to thank people for their passion. However, calling does make a difference. Emailing, I will tell you that the more personal the email, the better. We get a lot of these form emails. You can imagine. You go to change. Not that we use change.org, but they're one site, and there's a whole bunch of others out there where you go there and it finds out who your member is, and by putting your address in, and it automatically sends them an email, and then we get 100 emails that say exactly the same thing. It's important. It helps me know that there's a huge groundswell, but for me, it's the personal ones. It's telling me your story and telling me why. I had an amazing gentleman that ran me up one side and down the other on my Facebook page, and he's local from Hampton Roads. And I reached out to him and said, "Look, can we get together?" And we did, and now he's one of my biggest supporters. Defends me on Facebook when some people don't realize it. But he shared his personal story about the situation with him and his brother-in-law, and a very tragic situation that went down with his brother-in-law and his sister. And that means the world. And so stories like that, I mean, I'm already on the side of all of us, but those are the stories that if you find a legislator that, doesn't agree, it's those personal stories that really make them think. It's not numbers, it's not, 30,000-foot view, it's those personal stories. So those mean the most. And I will tell you the biggest thing this year, and I know we all say it, that lobby day was amazing. It truly was unreal. For anyone that came out to that, thank you. I will tell you, and you already know this, the Republicans are in the minority in the House and Senate. We couldn't stop a bill if our life depended on it. The bills that have stopped. You want to know why 961 stopped? It didn't stop because of me. It didn't stop because of Republicans in the Senate. And I would argue that out of the gate, some of those Democrats that kind of helped us weren't helping us out of the gate. That bill and other bills that never quite saw the light of day stopped because of y'all. When y'all came, we've never seen a turnout like that, even close, up here in the General Assembly. And it was so personal. It was very easy for legislators to walk up and have conversations, whether they agreed or not. The friendliness, the people that were here really, they weren't yelling and screaming at the Democrats and people that don't agree. It was, having the conversations, and those that could get into the building, going to see their legislators. But at the end of the day, and then cleaning the streets, I mean, we have rallies every year and lobby days every year, and we don't see that. So I will tell you that lobby day was amazingly impactful. And thank you to everyone that came.
Kristen Stewart asks, what specifically is still at stake in terms of the bills that are currently still being debated or have to be voted on? And who do we contact? And I think that the broader question is there anything that activists can do, given that we're pretty far along in terms of where the bills are in their life cycle? And are there any opportunities to stop some of these bills, like the red flag bills and a few of these other concerning ones?
Sure. So I've got a number of these things. I had Andrew put together a spreadsheet. So a couple of them that are still concerning out there, the background check bill. So it's HB2. It is on the floor tomorrow. There's a Senate substitute, I believe, that was put on top of that bill. But that background check bill is out there. And here's why that background check bill is concerning. I know we talk about the registry that it potentially creates and some other issues. But if you really one of the biggest issues is if you go through the bill, it actually says that the buyer or transferee, the person basically receiving the firearm, is liable for ensuring that background check was done, completed, and came out in the proper manner. The problem is that when you read the bill, the only thing it allows is for the transferor or the seller, the person actually transferring the weapon. It only allows for that person to go to a licensed dealer to ask for the background check to be completed. It only allows the licensed dealer to communicate with that seller, and then the seller communicate with the buyer. So how do you hold the buyer responsible for something you don't even give them an avenue to verify? We asked in subcommittee Brian Moran, who Secretary of I think it's Homeland Security or Public Safety or whatever, that question, and he said we don't hold anyone liable but the seller. And then I pointed out that section of the bill, and he realized that we were right. So we got that issue in there. We have the issue of, they said, oh, it won't create too long of a time frame to wait, but the problem is it really does, because although there's a time frame for the licensed dealer to get the background check completed from state police, there's no requirement on how quickly they initiate the background check when the seller in a private transaction asks them to, nor how quickly that dealer gets back to the seller when they've got the answer. And we all know that private transactions compete with licensed dealers. So they're not motivated to do this quickly, I wouldn't imagine. So there's a number of issues, but that bill's still around. The local option bill, look, this is one of the worst bills out there. This is also up tomorrow. If you can imagine every locality in the state of Virginia deciding on every law around firearms. So how you transport, if you can transport, what condition of weapon has to be under the transport, what you're allowed to possess. I mean, literally, me going from Virginia Beach to Suffolk becomes impossible if Norfolk and Chesapeake decide that I'm not allowed to carry a firearm through their localities. I mean, could you imagine, as bad as it's going to be for us that live here, could you imagine someone, a veteran flying into Norfolk Airport or Richmond Airport to come see their buddy to go hunting and, have a firearm with them, and then not thinking he has to check, the gun laws of 3 different localities when he's driving to his buddy's place? It is, I'm once again not an attorney, but I look at the term entrapment and figure this can't be that far from entrapment when you start creating a patchwork of stuff like this. So that's that bill. That bill's still out there. The next one, the one gun a month bill, so of all the benign bills, and I use benign lightly, because it's at least, I think, a bill that doesn't accidentally put a law-abiding gun owner in jail. But it's a bill that I don't think moves the needle on anything. There's not a statistic out there that says this makes a difference. Virginia is not. I think Virginia now is the 5th state when it comes to guns into New York. We're not even 1, 2, or 3 anymore. When one gun a month went into effect last time, the internet wasn't around yet, so you didn't have to deal with internet sales, which is obviously a way around things now. And I tell people, when I shot firearms competitively, there was tournaments that I shot in that it was, I think, 40, 45, and 9 mil handguns. And so now I'd have to wait 3 months to be able to compete, if I want to get started shooting in in those tournaments again. So I know the other side just considers it an inconvenience, but I would argue, even if that's true, just show me one upside, just one, and they can't. So that's still in there. Another big one. So the firearm access is up tomorrow. Firearm access by children. This is a bill that causes a problem, and I need to read you the language on this just so y'all can understand. So, in Virginia, it is already a law that if you recklessly leave a loaded unsecured firearm in a manner as to endanger the life or limb of any person under the age of 14, you're in violation of the law. However, at this point, it's only a Class 3 misdemeanor and basically a $250 fine. So, albeit it's very ambiguous in the status quo, it's a small fine if you end up being found guilty of it. And I'm not quite sure how you'd be enforced, that sort of thing. However, now it's that same language. It's leaving a loaded, unsecured firearm in a manner to endanger life or limb of a person under the age. Actually, now it's 18. But the problem is ambiguous language and it's a Class 6 felony. Class 6 felony is 1 to 5 years in prison. So it's a huge problem because the fine for me, loaded. So one day I was leaving one of the committees and I ran by a couple of local police, and they thanked me for some of my comments in committee and on the floor and some of the stuff that our side's been doing. And I said, guys, let me ask you a question. But we have a lot of legislation going around. Can you define for me loaded? Is it a loaded magazine in the handgun, or is it one in the chamber? And they said, Delegate, we don't know. We've never been asked. And so that gets to be concerning because I'm here writing the legislation. Well, I didn't write this, obviously, but I'm here voting on this, and I can't tell you what loaded means. Neither could the person that wrote the bill. When you say endangering life or limb, so if you have a semi-automatic handgun and it's a loaded magazine, but nothing in the chamber around a 3-year-old, are you endangering life and limb? Because that 3-year-old's not racking that slide. So, and I brought that up to someone I knew on the other side of the aisle, and they said, Glenn, why would you ever want to do that? If they accidentally dropped the weapon, it could go off. If they pulled the trigger, it could go off and kill someone. And I said, no, you don't get it. If I don't have something in the chamber, I can drop that gun 1 billion times. It's not going off. Or I can pull the trigger 1 billion times. It's not going off. There's nothing for that firing pin to hit. And they didn't realize that. So that bill's out there, and it's concerning at this point because similar language to the status quo, but instead of a $250 fine, you go to prison. And it's not if an accident occurs with a child, it's you leave it in a manner that an accident could occur with a child. And then the last one I'll bring up is the assault and battery bill, because here's also what's going on. Bills that dealt with penalties, misdemeanors, felonies, changing what someone can do when they've been found guilty of different classes of crimes, was always going in the past to courts of justice. That is where our best attorneys, both sides of the aisle, were. I mean, those are bills we can't afford to screw up. I mean, not that we can afford to screw anything up, but when you start talking about what someone goes to jail over, what they lose their constitutional rights over, we need to make sure that it's at that committee that honestly does debate the definition of every little word. What's the definition of they want to get it right, and we've always been able to trust that. This year, that's not the case. They've sent these bills to education that deal with this stuff and the firearms that deal with this stuff. And here's a prime example, because there was a bill that came to us in firearms that said that if you're accused of assault and battery of a family member, that you lose your rights to own a firearm for 5 years. And I'm thinking, okay, assault and battery is pretty bad. I thought there was already a law that said if you get found guilty of assault and battery, you lose your rights to a firearm. And so I'm going through all these bills one night before the next morning. At 3 in the morning, I'm pulling case law, and by complete accident, I wander upon or found myself upon a case, a Virginia law or case on this particular issue of someone in the past losing their firearm rights, being found guilty of a assault and battery misdemeanor in the state of Virginia. And the federal courts ruled that assault and battery in Virginia doesn't rise to that level as a misdemeanor, because unlike the federal requirements where it takes a physical force, in Virginia, it doesn't. It's just unwanted touching. Not only that, but it could be, hurting someone's feeling, and that's in case law. So literally, the example I used was if I'm at Thanksgiving dinner and out of anger, I throw a baby carrot at my nephew or at my cousin, and he brings me up on assault and battery, I lose my rights to have a firearm for 5 years. And the staff attorney in that room said, yes, if you're convicted, you lose your rights for 5 years. And as crazy as that sounds, there was a case, I think it was just 2 years ago, where a 13-year-old in school in Virginia threw a baby carrot at a teacher and got charged with assault and battery. So that bill is still alive, and it's inside the Senate as well. So those are the ones I'll bring up. I know there's other questions. I apologize, but I just want to make sure people realize that not everything's dead, and some of this stuff is very live, and unfortunately probably will pass.
Wow. Yeah, thanks for the thoroughness of that. It amazes me how illiterate some of of these lawmakers are in firearms. I'm joking, of course, but I would love to see a bill that requires lawmakers to take a firearm safety class before they introduce any bills related to firearms. I think that would help weed out a lot of these crazy bills. But
I think so
aside,
too.
I had one more question to ask you. I know we're out of time, so I won't keep you long. Just very briefly, I want to ask you about Michael Bloomberg. And he, of course, has poured a lot of money into Virginia elections. He's had a big impact on gun control in Virginia. Now his organization is focusing on Texas next. My question for you is, do you think Bloomberg's presidential candidacy is a good thing or a bad thing for 2A supporters?
Well, I mean, I don't think any Democratic candidacy right now is a good thing. They all kind of think the same thing. I think it's a bad thing. Now, I'm a little biased because he had a ton of money that came to my opponent. Now, keep in mind, the person I ran against last November for re-election was the woman that cut an AR-15 in half during her prior congressional race to prove a point, created an SBR, and got investigated by the ATF. So understand I'm a little biased because I had to run against someone like that, and they threw money against me. But no, I think we need presidents that and candidates that understand the importance of the Second Amendment, that understand firearms, and Bloomberg clearly isn't one of them. I'm not sure if you were to rank them by those more friendly to least friendly, how that ranks. I think they've all kind of put out kind of a extreme agenda on them, it seems. But no, obviously he's put a lot of money behind this initiative, and I think it'd be problematic. Obviously, if he were to win. Go ahead.
Yeah. Do you think that his candidacy will shift the focus for Democrats towards gun control and pull them towards putting more emphasis on that particular issue than they would have if he hadn't run?
I wouldn't think so, and the only reason why, not that there won't be a little bit of emphasis, but no one can beat Bloomberg on that issue, right? I mean, he's the only one with that much money, so arguably he's the only one that could put that much money into the issue. But if that becomes an issue in the Democratic primary, he wins. I mean, he's gotten more press on it. He's put more money into the issue. He's been more pronounced on the issue. So as all the Democrats tend to be restrictive when it comes to 2A rights, if they end up with a debate with him on who's more so-called reasonable and has common sense gun control positions, he wins. So I think if they're looking to win in debates, they stay away from that. And I saw a comment just a couple minutes ago on that 44K again, and someone asked me if I had any letters or anything, or if it's in the financial disclosure. And I just want to answer really quick, because now that we're talking about Bloomberg, they can definitely check my financial disclosure. They can go online and look at, I think it's Blue Virginia is the Democratic blog that brought this up, and they were really annoyed that I did this to them. You can look at my financial filing where I claimed it in kind. There's a lot of places you can go to find out that, yeah, this wasn't cash, and they were not happy with what I did, and that this solely was me taking all the stuff they wanted to throw at me and just basically shoving it back in their face and saying, if you want to run on this, I'll run on it with you, and good luck. And just so, what happened, my opponent outraised me. She spent over $1 million in this race. We spent $250,000. She spent $560,000 on TV. We spent $0 on TV. I worked my rear end off, had a great team, grassroots, and we won by 500 votes because I had made a point that we were going to prove something on this one. So, but if they still have questions, they can reach out to me via email or phone call. I'd be happy to have further discussions on it.
Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us. Congratulations on winning the campaign. I can speak for myself personally, who's grateful for the votes that you've had supporting the Second Amendment and the energy and the effort that you put in the Second Amendment, and also making yourself available to us for these type of conversations. I saw a lot of comments on folks really enjoying the conversation, really enjoying listening to you get into the weeds about some of these bills and being really candid with us about your votes and the explanation between some of these questions. So thank you for that. If you guys have time over the next couple of days for you or your staff to reply to a couple of these questions that we didn't get a chance to answer, I know the guys in the audience would appreciate it. And hopefully we can do this again soon. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll do it whenever you'd like, and I really appreciate it.
All right. Thanks so much. Have a good one.
You too. Thank you.
Yep, bye.